Okay, so there is one more step before we actually start creating the hair, and that is tell Blender where we actually want our hairs to come out of. So we need to tell Blender, right? Otherwise, it is actually just going to put hairs everywhere, and we don't want that. So we are gonna be using the new hair system and especially the interpolate system. So we need to tell Blender where we want our hairs and where we don't want our hairs. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to paint a mask, and that is basically what we are going to be doing. So you can see that I am actually just creating a single udim UVs, so we basically don't have to use the multiple texture. We can only use the one image texture to create that. Spoiler alert, you can actually just use the weight paint as well if you really want to, or the vertex color, so you don't really need to use the image texture. But I was actually, I don't know why, maybe because the project actually took so long that it just didn't came into my mind, and I am just creating a image texture. You don't really have to do this. I'll show you the way, by the way, just in case if you're wondering, but I think I'm just going to put that in the middle of this recording somewhere. Or maybe I'll just create a different video. I think that actually makes more sense. A different video would be much more better. So yeah, this is basically what I'm gonna do. As you can see that I'm in the texture paint mode, and now I'm just painting out the borders so that I can actually just fill it afterwards. Now I am going to separate out the head hairs, the beard, and the mustache in three different texture files. So you're gonna see that in the future. Right now, this is the mask for the head hairs, as you can clearly see. This is basically what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the hair groups as well. For example, the beard and the mustache. You don't really need to use the texture like the image texture. Case of image texture, you're going to have to handle one more image textures with all the image texture that you have already created. It basically takes more space, right? It takes more memory. So I think it's actually better to just use the weight paint or the color attributes, and I'll actually show you how to do that, by the way. But yes, maybe in the end of this video I'll do that. But yeah, this is basically what I'm doing. After you are done with the mask, I'll also show you how to use the mask. Right now I am actually just painting it out. Obviously you can just change the mask whenever you want. This is again pretty nice thing to do. And now you're gonna see that I'm actually just gonna add the hairs. The name that I'm giving right now is just for the sake of this video. I'm gonna redo this stuff in the next video, so don't you worry about it. This is just for explanation. You can see that the points per curve are 24. I think it was 24, right? So that is to only show you how much points we are gonna be using. But yeah, right now the purpose of this video is to show you how much not how much, but how does the mask basically influence. So let me just create some hairs like this, and let me just go back to the object, and now I'll add the interpolate modifier. You have to add that on the hairs, by the way, and you can see that the hairs have been gone, but yeah, you can actually put them back by increasing the density. So right now we are at the 10, and you need to increase it to something like this, something like 5,000, and you can see that hairs are coming out of basically every part of this mesh. So that's why we need to use the uh, texture in the mask texture. Now I'll actually show you in at the end of the video how you can actually use the weight paint or maybe the color attribute, and that way of doing stuff is actually much more easier and much more better to do. This is basically how you would tell Blender where you want hairs and where you don't want hairs. And now you can actually just start, combing. You can just do the same thing with other modifiers as well. Blender does allow you to do that now that you have this stuff with the geometry node. I'll just show all the stuff in the future. Don't you worry about it. This is just like the masking stuff. I have only made this video to show you how the texture mask could be used in order to tell Blender where we want the hairs and where we don't want the hairs. This is basically what we are gonna be doing. But before I go, I actually have promised you that I'm gonna show you a video of doing stuff with the weight paint. As you can see that I have Suzanne here, and now I'm just going to subdivide it 3 times so that we basically have a little bit of geometry to work with. Now that we have that, let's actually just start creating a hair system. So you can see that I have added the empty hairs. And now let's actually see the modifiers that we have. So these are the modifiers, and we're going to be using the interpolate one. But before I add that, let me just groom simple little mustache so that we basically can see how it looks and how the effect looks basically. It is not really gonna take that long. It is just gonna be like a 20 or 30-second process. We are actually done. So this is going to be the groom that we are gonna try to do that. And now what we want, we basically wanna tell Blender where we want the hairs and where we don't want the hairs. So in this particular case, I am actually gonna be using the weight paint. You can use the vertex color paint. Sorry, not the color paint, but vertex paint as well. It is totally up to you. In this particular example, I'm using the weight paint. So as you can see that I have just used the weight paint, and I have also blurred it out a little bit. And now I'll actually just use the interpolate. But before that, obviously, you can change the vertex group name. In this particular case, I'm just gonna call it hair because why not? Like, it's just an example. Now just open up the geometry node panel. We need to add the interpolate modifier first, and you need to tell Blender the surface that you want to use. In this case, Suzanne is the surface, and you can see the hairs are basically everywhere. We don't want that. We don't want the hairs to be everywhere. So let's actually increase the density first. So the density is at 500, and as you can see how the hairs are looking. Okay, now that you have this, the way you're gonna do it is pretty simple. First thing first, you need to put it into the nodes. So move to nodes is the first step, and then you select everything by pressing A, and then just home everything by full stop. So now you have name attributes over here, which is something that you're not going to remove or anything. But you need to duplicate it, and where you see the name UV map, you need to replace it with the hair. So now this is gonna go into the density mask. Now this is important. You cannot put it into the density because it just does not let you do that. And because of that, you need to just put it into the density mask, and voila, you can clearly see that you basically can increase the density now. So for example, you can add a 0 uh, to increase the density, and you can clearly see that it is working, which is pretty nice. And now you can like clump the hairs, for example. So this is the clump. See, this is actually working. So this is like the way you are gonna be doing stuff instead of the image texture. I think this is much more simpler way of doing stuff. That is something that I didn't do in the course. So just remember, this is also one of the ways, and I think it is one of the simpler ways. After that, I'm just gonna see in the next one where we'll actually just start grooming the head.